Hey everyone, today we're looking at GTA 5, which finally shipped for PC, and it's been a long time in development, and the reason for this development becomes apparent when we look at the game's settings, its graphics optimizations, and its overall performance on PC, and that's something we'll talk about in a few moments here. Today what we're looking at is the video card performance in GTA 5 when using a 4790K CPU. So we're looking at raw GPU performance for comparative purposes, and I tested everything from a 250X all the way up to a Titan X and SLI GTX 980. So there's a lot of variety here. In fact, I've got so many video cards around me right now that I don't really have anywhere to put my arms. So we have a lot of stuff. And the game is fairly interesting from a benchmarking perspective, and it's something we'll be including in all GPU reviews going forward for the immediate future at least, and this is because it includes a few new options in the settings menu. One of the most immediately useful outputs in the GTA 5 settings menu is the video RAM consumption, or the memory consumption made by your GPU dependent upon the graphics settings currently configured in the game. So this doesn't show the constant usage of video memory, but it shows the maximum theoretical consumption of video memory as your settings dictate. If you lower the settings in the game, it will lower the peak consumption of video RAM. And this is useful for configuring options to make sure you're getting optimal performance for the GPU you've got and the amount of memory it's got available to it. So this game is one that will run better, in theory, with 4GB or better video cards, but we did test it with 2GB and even a 1GB card just for comparison purposes to see how true that statement is and whether you can get by on a 2GB video card with GTA 5. We also tested it at 4K, 1440, and 1080 resolution, so big range there, huge undertaking for us. Those who are gaming on high resolution monitors will definitely need a higher end card because some of the settings in the game are fairly graphics intensive, and we'll go over a few of those now before getting to the frame rate charts. Some of the biggest items on the list are the three slider options on the graphics settings tab, which include population density, population variety, and then distance scaling. Population density is the amount of NPCs and NPC interactable objects drawn to the screen at any given time. So the higher the slider is in the bar, the more NPCs you'll have rendered to the screen. This increases the geometry drawn, it increases the polygon count, and eats into our poly budget, and it also makes more draw calls to the GPU from the CPU, so it places heavier load on both the CPU and the GPU. In this instance, increasing population density will have a fairly noticeable impact on gameplay as well, because you'll have more NPCs you can interact with, but it does eat into performance, so make that note. Population variety, just educated speculation here, I have not confirmed this with Rockstar, I believe is the amount of objects and NPCs and things of that sort, perhaps vehicles, drawn to screen at any given time before it starts repeating objects and reusing some of those models, effectively recycling assets that are on the screen. So a higher population variety will increase the immersive nature of the game. And then we've got distance scaling in the graphics tab and the expandable view distance in the advanced graphics tab. View distance and distance scaling impact the level of detail and the amount and proximity with which objects are drawn as you approach them. So if you are farther away from, say, the downtown area of the city, and you're maybe approaching in a jet, and you've got a shorter view distance, you will not see the city until you're effectively within interaction range of the environment. It'll start rendering and buildings will pop up, and level of detail will increase as you approach the city. Level of detail much lower as you're farther away from the city, because you don't need all of those high resolution textures and finite geometry details when you're farther away. Other settings include shadow settings like NVIDIA's PCSS, or percentage closer softer shadows, and AMD's contact hardening shadows, or CHS. Both of these technologies do somewhat similar things but have different methodologies and implementations in their approach. CHS will change the sharpness or blurriness of the shadow's edges depending on its distance from the light in the game. So if the light source is farther away, it will impact how soft the edges of the shadow look to be a bit more realistic and believable. PCSS does something kind of similar, and we've talked about it in the past. We've also got things like texture resolution and quality of shadows and shaders, and these things don't impact video memory as much. Texture resolution has a huge impact on it. Let's move on to the benchmarks and see what the actual performance of all these video cards is. At 4K resolution using Ultra settings, which I define in the benchmark linked in the description below and the test methodology, we see that the two PNY GTX 980s, which are overclocked cards, outperform everything else, getting 56 frames per second on average when 0 AA is applied. And then following that is the Titan X, which is a $1,000 video card, which performs at 40 FPS average. In my article linked in the description below, I explained that 40 to 50 FPS is adequate for playing GTA 5 comfortably and smoothly. It is not the kind of high precision game that demands 60 FPS constantly. So if you're at 40 or 50 FPS, you're in pretty good shape. 40 is getting a little bit close to the danger zone, because when things get more crazy, there will be drops that are noticeable. But 30 is not where I would want to be. The GTX 980 standalone is at 30, so it's not great for 4K at ultra settings. And then the R9 290X falls below 30 FPS average and is not really something we recommend for playing 4K with ultra settings. Looking at high settings, though, it becomes a bit of a different story. The Titan X is suddenly pushing 63 FPS, so very playable at high settings with 4K resolution, and still looks great too. The GTX 980 4GB card runs at 47 FPS, and we did not test the SLI 980s here because we effectively determined that if you have them, you would not be playing 4K on high, you would be playing 4K on ultra. The 290X is finally a more playable frame rate at 39. We'd probably still drop a few of the settings just a tick to push it to 40 or a little above 40, but still very playable at 39 for the most part, other than when it gets very crazy. Moving on to 1440p, we look at the GTX 980s and SLI at the very top with about 100 FPS on average, followed by the Titan X at 80, the 980 at 65, and so forth. At this point, if you're trying to play GTA 5 at 1440 resolution with ultra settings, we would probably encourage you to purchase something along the lines of a GTX 970, which does not appear in this benchmark due to availability, but would perform similarly to the GTX 780 in this benchmark. So the 970 would be our key recommendation there for 1440. And then on the AMD side, the 290X, which is very affordable these days, is a very value-intensive competitor with NVIDIA. 1080 gaming with ultra settings really has the top-end cards blowing this game away. You should probably just play on a higher resolution or use VSR or DSR, virtual and dynamic super resolutions from AMD and NVIDIA if you have a higher-end card, because they can push it, so might as well. But if you just want to play 1080 with ultra or very high settings, then you would do pretty well on a GTX 770, an R9 285, even a GTX 960 4GB model or 2GB model do pretty well with the settings as they are at 1080p. You could drop them just a tad if you wanted to improve performance slightly of the 960s. And then anything above that is getting to be a bit excessive. So we would recommend the 960 and the 285 at this price range. If you've got a 770, you're already in good shape. As for the 270X, it falls a little bit close to our limit for playable FPS. So we would recommend the 270X in the instance you are playing 1080p with high settings, not ultra settings. As you can see in this next chart, the 270X pushes 60 FPS at high with 1080p. So very strong performer at $140. That makes it a good price point. The 750 Ti, if you prefer NVIDIA and want to limit your TDP requirements and your power cables and make cable management easier, performs at 52 FPS. So it's a close contender to the 270X, and it's priced about the same. You just kind of have to make that judgment call on your own whether you care about those extra NVIDIA features. At the end of the day, the best video cards for GTA 5 are fairly obvious based on these charts. The 970 is great for 1440p, and the 980 in SLI or a Titan X would do excellently for 4K at ultra settings. If you are playing 1080p like most of us do, then you can get away with just about anything that's in the mid-range market, so that'd be 200 or higher in terms of initial buying cost. The GTX 960 is a very stable and reliable card with a lot of technology on it that those who like doing streaming and things like that could take advantage of. And then if you prefer AMD, or you just want the higher raw FPS output at a similar price, the 280X would be worth looking at. That's about $230, $240, depending on what you buy. So those would be my recommendations from both major manufacturers on each side. If you want more detail, I would encourage you to check out the article linked in the description below, as it has the full benchmark, the charts, the game settings, and all that stuff. It's pretty cool if you want to do the test yourself. We help you figure out how to do that. So let me know what you think about GTA 5. Let me know what you think about the graphics in the comments below. I'm curious to hear if you think that this is a direction we want to go in the industry, where we're finally utilizing PC hardware to its fullest extent, or would you rather see resources diverted elsewhere? Thanks again for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you like this content. It helps us a lot if you subscribe, and definitely leave a comment or like things or tweet at us at GamersNexus, as we do interact with all those means of communication, and I will see you all next time.